I was in the bathroom when Mason walked in without knocking. Again. The handle turned like it belonged to him, and I guess, technically, it did. We shared everything now, rent, fridge space, the same ugly plaid throw blanket on the couch. But somehow, the bathroom still felt like the last border I hadn't let him cross. He leaned against the doorframe like he didn't notice the steam or the way I flinched. "You left your charger in the kitchen." His voice was casual. Always was. Like he didn't feel what I did when we sat too close on the couch, or when his laugh made something bloom in my chest that I couldn't name. Like the air between us wasn't getting heavier with everything unsaid. I didn't answer right away. Just stared at him in the mirror, at the boy with sleep-creased cheeks and the hoodie he stole from me last week. My toothbrush hung in my mouth like I'd forgotten what it was for. We weren't a couple. We weren't even friends in that easy, defined way. But I remembered the way he said goodnight the night before, too soft, like he was trying not to mean more than he should. Some part of me wanted to ask him why he always came in like this. Like we weren't pretending. Like maybe he wanted to stop pretending too. But I said nothing. And he stayed anyway. Like he was waiting for me to finally let him in. I moved in with Mason in the middle of March. The city was still shaking off the cold, slush lining the sidewalks and trees just beginning to think about blooming. I had just ended a 3-year relationship, lost a job I wasn't sure I ever really wanted, and said yes to the first Craigslist ad that didn't feel like a horror story. The apartment was a walk-up in a crooked old building with warped hardwood floors and radiators that hissed like they had secrets. Mason showed me around in a pair of mismatched socks, one hand curled around a mug of something too herbal to be called coffee. "You'll get used to the pipes talking at night," he said, giving the bathroom door an affectionate pat. "It's part of the charm." He didn't ask me why I was moving. I didn't ask him why he lived like someone still waiting to leave. We were a good match in the way two strangers sometimes are, polite, quiet, coexisting in the same space with an unspoken agreement to stay out of each other's way. At least at first. Mason had this softness to him, like a favorite song playing in another room. Always there, just quiet enough that you had to lean in to really hear it. He wore oversized sweatshirts and read books with frayed spines. The first time I heard him hum while doing the dishes, I paused in the hallway and listened like it was something private I wasn't supposed to hear. He worked late shifts at a local bookstore, came home smelling like paper and dust and the faintest hint of bergamot from the cheap tea they kept behind the counter. He always kicked off his shoes at the door, always left the light on in the kitchen for me if I came home late. Small, thoughtful rituals that felt louder than words. Me. I was still unraveling. Still figuring out who I was without the version of myself that had loved someone who didn't love me back the way I needed. I spent most of my time freelancing, which meant sitting at the kitchen table in worn-out flannel and pretending I was busy enough to justify staying in my own head. I didn't go out much. I didn't call home. The silence was easier than explaining the kind of heartbreak that makes you feel like a ghost in your own skin. But Mason never asked me to explain. He made space for me without saying it. And maybe that was the beginning. We started falling into routines. Sunday laundry days, rotating who bought groceries, watching trash TV while pretending we were above it. He always made popcorn with too much butter. I always pretended not to like it, even though I never turned it down. He had this habit of talking to his plants, small trailing pothos and a stubborn peace lily he kept insisting wasn't dead. I caught him once, crouched beside it with a glass of water and a whisper like he was trying to convince it to stay. I wondered if anyone had ever done that for him. At night, when the world got quieter, we talked more. Not always about anything important. Sometimes just nonsense. But it chipped away at something, slowly, the way water does to stone. He told me once that he used to write music but hadn't touched his guitar in over a year. That his mom was a piano teacher who used to sit beside him and let their hands share the keys until he got it right. I told him I used to think I'd end up in New York. That I pictured a life where I wore button-ups and had lunch meetings and someone waiting for me at home who made it all make sense. "Why didn't you go?" he asked. I shrugged. Maybe I got tired of chasing things that didn't want to be caught. He looked at me then, not in a way that probed or judged, just saw me. Really saw me. We didn't talk about it again. But after that, he started leaving notes on the fridge. Just small things, reminders to water the plants, or a cartoon scribble of a cat saying pay rent. But they made me smile more than I admitted. One day, I came home to a sticky note that read, *, you look tired this morning. Hope today was kind. *, I didn't throw it away. We never touched the topic of love. It was like walking beside a lake and refusing to look at your reflection. But it was there. In the way he'd hand me a blanket without asking. In the way I'd listen for his key in the door and feel something in my chest loosen when I heard it. And sometimes, in the smallest moments, like him handing me a cup of coffee before I asked, or him resting his head on the back of the couch when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd feel the ache of something blooming. Something I didn't know how to name yet. Something I was scared would vanish if I said it out loud. There's a moment, sometimes, right before something happens, where everything slows down just enough for you to feel the weight of what's coming. Not in a dramatic way. Not like a movie. Just a stillness, a hum under your skin. I started noticing those moments more around Mason. Like the night the power went out during a thunderstorm. We were curled up on opposite ends of the couch, the usual space between us occupied by popcorn and half-watched reruns of Asterisk Parks and Rexstar. When the lights flickered, I didn't move. When they cut out entirely, plunging the apartment into a dim, rain-muffled hush, Mason didn't move either. "I think the universe wants us to stop watching this garbage," he said, voice low, almost amused. "You say that like you don't know exactly how many seasons there are." I expected him to get up, to light a candle or fiddle with the breaker. But instead, he stayed where he was, legs pulled up under him, eyes faintly visible in the storm-darkened room. "This is kind of nice," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Not with words, at least. I just shifted slightly, enough that my knee brushed his. Neither of us moved away. It wasn't the kind of touch you could explain later. It didn't belong to friendship, not really. But we left it there, like a secret resting between us. After that night, things changed in the smallest of ways. We talked more, but not about what mattered. He started playing music again, gently, like he didn't want anyone to hear. Sometimes I'd lie in bed and listen through the wall, breath held like I might shatter the moment if I moved too loudly. I told myself it didn't mean anything. That this was just what happened when you lived in close quarters. That I was lonely, vulnerable. That he didn't feel the way I did. But then there were the mornings. The ones where he made 2 mugs of coffee without asking. The ones where our fingers touched when we reached for the same dish, and neither of us pulled back right away. And then there was the moment with the towel. It was late. I just showered, hair dripping, towel wrapped low around my waist. I opened the bathroom door and there he was, standing too close. Holding my charger again, of course. That had somehow become his excuse to check on me, like he thought I might fall apart without it. He looked up at me and said nothing. His eyes dropped, then met mine again. I didn't move. The towel didn't feel like it covered enough, suddenly. He swallowed hard. You always take really hot showers," he said, finally. Voice light. A joke. A deflection. "So I've been told." Another pause. Just long enough to make it dangerous. I stepped past him, close enough to feel the fabric of his hoodie brush my damp arm. He didn't say anything. And I didn't stop wondering what might have happened if I had just stayed still. It was getting harder to pretend. Harder to sleep through the sound of his laugh echoing down the hall. Harder to tell myself I didn't look for him in every quiet space of our apartment. One evening, after a long, cold walk home from the grocery store, he handed me a cup of tea instead of coffee. I stared at it like it was a revelation. "You hate herbal tea," I said, blinking. He shrugged. "You had a rough day. Figured you could use something warm. Gentle." I held the cup for a long time before drinking it. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore, it was charged. Full of glances that lingered and sentences that died halfway through. I started dreaming about him, not sex dreams, but soft ones. Dreams where he was laughing in the sunlight, or brushing hair from my eyes, or standing too close with that look he sometimes wore when he didn't know I was watching. And then came the worst part, I started needing him. Not just liking him. Not just hoping. Needing. The realization cracked something open in me. Because I knew what needing someone could do. I'd needed someone before, needed them so much I forgot who I was outside of them. And when they left, they took every version of me with them. So I pulled back. I smiled less. Stayed out longer. Closed my bedroom door at night instead of leaving it cracked the way I used to, just in case he passed by and wanted to say something. And Mason noticed. He didn't confront me, not directly. But I saw it in his eyes, the confusion, the quiet hurt he didn't name. He started leaving fewer notes. Played his guitar less. Spent more time at the bookstore, even on his nights off. One night, I found him asleep on the couch, curled up like he was trying to take up less space. I stood there for a long time, watching him. His hair was a mess, face soft with sleep. His hand twitched slightly, like he was dreaming something he couldn't say out loud. I wanted to touch him. Just, gently. A hand on his shoulder. A thumb across his cheek. But I didn't. Because I didn't know how to reach for him without asking for everything. Eventually, things had to break. It was after a late dinner, something dumb like boxed mac and cheese and frozen peas. We were laughing about a bad movie when I dropped my fork and bent down to pick it up. When I sat up again, our faces were inches apart. Too close. And for a moment, neither of us moved. He looked at me like he was seeing every version of me at once, the one who made sarcastic comments during TV shows, the one who flinched when touched unexpectedly, the one who left the kitchen light on for him when he stayed out too late. And then he whispered, "Why won't you let me in?" The question was so quiet I almost convinced myself I misheard it. But I didn't. I couldn't answer. Not then. So I stood up, put my dish in the sink, walked to my room and shut the door, and leaned against it, heart hammering. Because I wanted to let him in. I just didn't know how. It happened on a Wednesday. Midweek, grey sky, the kind of day that felt like it was holding its breath. I'd worked a long shift at a client's office, something corporate and cold, where no one looked each other in the eye unless they needed something. I came home with a dull ache behind my eyes and the kind of quiet that made everything inside me feel too loud. Mason was in the kitchen. His back was to me, shoulders hunched slightly, a tea towel slung over one shoulder. He was chopping something with methodical precision, carrots, I think, and humming under his breath again. A soft, low tune that made the corners of my throat ache. He didn't hear me come in at first. I just stood there, watching him like I always did when he wasn't looking. And then, without thinking, I said, "You stopped leaving notes." He froze. The knife paused mid-slice. He didn't turn around. "I thought you needed space," he said, voice quieter than usual. "You've been different." "I have," I admitted. My voice cracked a little on the words. I didn't know what to do with this. He turned then. Slowly. Like he was giving me time to run if I needed to. "This," he echoed. "You mean, us?" It felt too big, the word. I nodded anyway. Mason set the knife down and braced his hands on the counter like he needed something solid to hold him up. "I didn't mean to push," he said. When you're around, I feel like I don't have to pretend I'm okay all the time. Like I can just exist." I swallowed hard. "That's the problem." His brow furrowed. "I've never had that before," I said. "Someone who sees me. Who makes me feel like I matter even when I'm not trying to be anything special." It scared me. "You scared you, he said gently. And he was right. The silence stretched between us, thick, trembling with something almost unbearable. "I've liked you for a while," I said suddenly, the words tumbling out before I could measure them. "Maybe since the second week. Maybe since you handed me that mug of coffee like it was nothing but it felt like everything." His mouth parted slightly. He didn't move. "I didn't know if you felt it too," I continued. "Or if I was just projecting. I didn't want to ruin it. I couldn't lose this. You." He took a step forward. "Just one. I've been waiting," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, I hoped you'd say something. But I knew I couldn't make you ready. You had to get there on your own." I blinked fast, throat tight. "And now I'm here," I whispered. He closed the space between us with quiet, steady steps. Not a rush, not a grand gesture, just presence. A promise. When he reached me, he didn't touch me right away. He stood there, inches away, eyes searching mine like he was memorizing every fracture. "I don't need you to be perfect," he said. "I don't need you to be ready for everything. I just need you to let me stay." I didn't answer with words. I reached up, slowly, gently, and cupped his face with both hands. His skin was warm, softer than I expected. And when I leaned in, he met me halfway. The kiss wasn't fireworks. It wasn't some cinematic, sweeping moment. It was soft, tentative, a question more than a statement. And when we pulled back, foreheads pressed together, it felt like something in me had exhaled for the first time in months. "I was never pretending with you," I said. "I know," he whispered. We stayed like that, in the quiet kitchen, while the carrots waited on the cutting board and the world kept spinning somewhere outside our window. I didn't feel scared. Not in the way I thought I would. Because love, when it's real, doesn't come crashing in. It doesn't demand or shout. Sometimes, it just stands there with its hands in its pockets, waiting for you to notice it's been there all along. That night, I didn't close my bedroom door. Mason didn't ask if he could come in. He just appeared in the doorway, a soft knock more out of respect than necessity. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey." We didn't do anything dramatic. Just lay there, side by side, the silence now a comfort instead of a wall. His hand found mine under the blanket, fingers curling slowly like they were learning a language all their own. And when he fell asleep with his head against my shoulder, I realized something. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something I couldn't stop feeling. And this time, I didn't want to. In the days that followed, we moved carefully around each other, like people navigating the ruins of something sacred. Not destroyed, not entirely, but shaken, changed. We didn't talk about what he'd said. I didn't ask if he remembered whispering, "Why won't you let me in?" And he didn't ask why I didn't answer. But something in the air had shifted. There was more silence, yes, but it wasn't empty. It was full of watching, waiting. I'd catch him looking at me like he was still hoping, even if just a little. And I'd look away, ashamed of how long I'd made him wait. One morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Just a yellow post-it with 4 words. Still here. Still yours. There was no signature. There didn't have to be. I sat down and stared at it for a long time, fingers resting lightly on the paper like I was afraid it might disappear. My chest ached in that way it does when something inside you is waking up again, tender, cautious, overwhelmed. That afternoon, I made tea. His kind. Herbal, lemon balm and mint. He found it waiting for him on the table when he got home. No note. Just a cup, still warm. When he looked up at me, I met his gaze and didn't look away. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. In soft mornings and long walks and conversations that started with, "Can I ask you something?" and ended with, "Yeah, me too." We began moving closer again, not just physically, but emotionally, quietly. I let him see more of me. The messy parts. The parts one used to hide from everyone. He never turned away. One evening, I found him playing guitar on the fire escape, the sun turning everything gold. I stood in the window, just listening. Not trying to be heard. Not trying to be noticed. Just present. When he saw me, he didn't say anything. Just tilted his head and played softer, like an invitation. I stepped outside and sat beside him, knees touching. Neither of us moved away. He played until the sky went dark. And when he finally stopped, he looked at me, not for an answer, not for permission. Just to see if I was still there. I was. And for the first time in months, I reached for his hand. Slowly. Deliberately. His fingers curled around mine without hesitation. We didn't say a word. We didn't need to. There are moments that don't look like love at first glance. They aren't grand or sweeping or obvious. They're quiet. They slip in through the cracks when you're not looking. Like the way he says my name when I've had a bad day. Or the way I memorize the slope of his shoulders when he's standing at the sink, humming under his breath. Love, I've learned, doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it tiptoes in. Finds a seat. Waits to be noticed. And when it's real, when it's it stays. We still live in that same crooked apartment with the hissing radiator and the bathroom door he never knocks on. The peace lily is thriving now, against all odds. He says it just needed time. Some nights, when he falls asleep on the couch, I cover him with that awful plaid blanket and smile at how easily he fits here now, in this space, in my life, in my heart. I don't know what the future holds. But I know this. He came in without knocking. And somehow, I finally let him stay.